I now have the opportunity to introduce our guest speaker, alumnus Jenny Youngblood Campbell. And we're really thrilled to have Jenny back here all the way from outside of Los Angeles, California, which she calls home. Some of you had the opportunity to, in fact, meet Jenny today because she was on your Central Selection Committee panel. We talked this morning at the start of the day about authorship. We talked about championing the journey. Jenny's someone who's done just that. She's boldly charted a path for herself to new challenge that has seen her take new and escalating challenges and pursue her passions. She started her career after leaving Carolina. She moved to Wheaton and Kennedy, the advertising firm. She then just did it. She went to Nike. And after a very successful rise at Nike, she swiped right, joined Tinder, and then most recently secured the bag as the chief marketing officer of Kate Spade, New York. Rather than read her whole biography, which is behind you, I think it's important that we get straight to the main event. Jenny, on behalf of all of us at Morehead-Cain, thank you for making the trip and for choosing to share your Morehead-Cain story and journey with our audience this evening. Cool.
Hi, everybody. Usually as a marketer, you get the benefit of having a big flashy screen behind you and you get to show ads and it takes a lot of pressure off. I'm feeling somewhat like naked and vulnerable up here just by myself. But I was thinking today that you guys all came into interviews today and did the same for us. So we're just gonna have a good conversation here. But Chris, I wanted to say thank you so much. That was one of the better intros. He had it swiped right in there. You got all the taglines. It was good. And I have to tell you that I'm having such a good time being in this room tonight because I got married in Chapel Hill and we had our rehearsal dinner in this very room. So I'm feeling all kinds of nostalgia. So as Chris said, I'm Jenny. You said something interesting today. You're like, Morehead scholars always introduce themselves with just their first name. When you said Jenny Youngblood Campbell, I was like, whoa, that's a lot. I'm just Jenny. But I'm from the class of 95. And before I get into what I do now and my story, I wanted to tell you, though, that I was not the first Morehead in my family. I was the second, actually, and my sister, Christine, who was definitely the first one. That's right. And I always want to say this because those people paved the way for you, and my sister is definitely that person. And throughout all my entire childhood, Christy was the one to do things first. And she figured out how to do things the hard way, usually. She got in trouble before me. She was always the one who was kind of looking out for me. And before we were married, our last name was Youngblood, and we were known as the Youngblood sisters in this tiny little town. And everyone asks me now, they're like, why did you give that name up? That was a cool name. But it was really fun being the Youngblood sisters, and everyone would kind of come around and ask our parents, like, what did you put in that drinking water to make their hair red, and how are they getting those good grades? And our parents would make some lame joke about good parenting, something like that. But it was really nice to do all that with Christy, because you've definitely been my rock, so it's fun. All right, not gonna cry. So as Chris said, I'm currently the CMO of Kate Spade, and before this role is the CMO of Tinder, which everyone loves to joke on me about. But I can tell you right now that I'm still really good. I know how to juice the algorithm. I know how to get your success rate up, so if you need to see me later, you can just chat with me on the side. We'll be very discreet. It's all good. And before Tinder, I worked at Nike for 7 years and at ad agencies like Wheaton and Kennedy and 72 and Sunny. And now I'm in Los Angeles, which I never thought I would be in. I've been there for about 7 years. When you live in Oregon for as long as I did, Oregonians hate Los Angeles. And I got a lot of, when I told people I was moving to Los Angeles, they would go, huh, you know that thing where they don't know what to say, they don't want to be rude, but they're just like, oh, interesting. So, but but it's been really nice to live there, and I have 2 teenagers. I have a 16-year-old son and an 18-year-old daughter. So I've lived most of my adult life on the West Coast, and I've worked in global roles for most of my career. I spent 3 years working in Amsterdam on Nike's European business, and I've traveled to over 45 countries at this point in my life. Mary, I thought of you when you have your goal of 50 countries. I'm going to get there with you at some point. But I'm definitely getting ahead of myself at this point. I've definitely had an interesting career journey, but it started off by growing up in a very rural community in North Carolina, probably a lot like many of you here. My trajectory was catapulted by the experiences I had through the Morehead Scholarship, the same experiences that you'd be part of as part of the Sophomore Intake program. So how many of you in this room are from small towns? Yeah, I love that. I see all of you. I will forever have a soft spot in my heart for leaders who come out of environments like that because I know exactly what it's like. Christy and I grew up in a small town in North Carolina called Siler City. You may have known it. It's about an hour south of Chapel Hill in Chatham County. So at the time Christy and I were growing up, Chatham County was known for chickens and tobacco. And you've always heard about Tobacco Road. There's a reason. We were literally the poster child for this. On either side of us was tobacco fields and chicken houses. Cars used to drive down our dirt road, and they would just cover our house with dust in our yard. I think now Chatham County is going through a resurgence, and there's all kinds of cool tech things happening and some RDU spillover, but that was definitely not the case when we were younger. Thinking about Halloween coming up, it used to take us 3 hours to go trick-or-treating, so you'd have to get in a car, and you'd drive. 10 minutes, you'd get out, you'd have to walk down this long road. Just to fill your bag it was definitely an endeavor. So my parents got divorced when I was very young, and my dad lived in Raleigh and was more of a Lions Club, church-going type. And my mom went the exact opposite way and went super hippie, which was part of the impetus for us to move out to Chatham County to live on a farm where we could grow our own food and have animals. Our farmhouse was a lovely house with a wraparound porch that had rocking chairs on it, and we had land with creek and pastures to play in. But above and beyond that, we didn't have much money to speak of. Our house didn't have central air or heating, so we would freeze in the winter and roast in the North Carolina summers. I still remember we had a wood stove. I remember carrying bricks wrapped in a dishcloth up to your bed at night. Chris, this is true. It was like Little House on the Prairie when I tell it now. And you would put them in your sheets to warm up your bed, and you would get trained to not have to use the restroom in the middle of the night because you're it's really, really cold outside of this house, outside of this bed. And Kristen and I went to a really small elementary school that had about 20-some kids in it per grade. And you went to school with those same 20 kids every year, whether you liked them or not, until you hit high school. And then the high school was also really small, but it pulled from all the other county schools. So once you hit 9th grade, it was pretty awesome because you got to meet some new kids finally. And this was not really like a private school situation where you had small classrooms intentionally. It was literally just an outcome of being in a really rural community. There just weren't that many kids around. So I remember having to do chores, about an hour's worth of chores in the morning before the bus came. The bus came around 7, so it was an early rise for us, and chores when I got home. My mom raised us to be very, very independent. We made our own breakfast, got ourselves ready in the morning. We were expected to do our homework on time, on our own, without oversight. We went to the library every week and checked out books to read for fun because we didn't have a TV for most of my early years. And if you've ever been raised on a farm, you know that everybody on a farm, no matter how big the farm is, you work. You work on the weekdays, you work on the weekends. So I was raised really early on to have a very strong work ethic. I was also raised with a very strong desire to get off that farm. So at the same time that we were living on the farm with my mom, Christy and I would go to my dad's house in Raleigh on the weekends. And we loved those weekends. Dad didn't know what to do with us. So we would just play games all weekend. And when you're used to doing chores instead, you're just like, this is the best thing ever. And we also went to a very fancy church each Sunday with all the kids from Broughton High School and Enloe. And I often felt so shy around these city kids. They just seemed so polished and so slick Their hair was pretty, their clothes were nice. They went to summer camps and they worked as lifeguards at their country clubs in the summer. I remember being like, I want to be a lifeguard. That sounds so cool. And they had southern accents, but they didn't sound country like I did. I sounded really country, and I felt awkward when I spoke. And they were all very nice to us, but I was just intimidated. I felt different, and not in a good way. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I wasn't good enough, really. But as many of you probably know, having a chip on your shoulder is an amazing motivational tool. I decided really early on that I was going to show everyone that I was just as good as those rich city kids. No one was going to outwork me. No one would want it more. No one was going to make me feel small. It was around that time I started papering my bedroom walls with Nike posters that would fire me up to push harder, go longer, spit in the eye of complacency. It was around the age of 14 that I decided I wanted to work for Nike, which became a dream come true. I also joined every club presented to me. I was that kid, but Hermione kid. I played every sport. If I got less than a 95 on a test, I would ask to take it over. I was that kid who went to band camp, to science and math camp, to basketball camp. Some of it was to get out of chores, doing chores in the summer on the farm, but it was mainly just because I wanted it more. Our school didn't have AP courses then, and while my SAT scores were good for Chatham County, I'm pretty sure that I had the lowest SAT scores in all of my Morehead class. I remember those first couple months, and some people, if they had made a really good score, would mention it, and all of a sudden I was like, I'm never mentioning my score to anyone. Chris, you said something earlier today around freshman year GPA is less of an indication of your ability to be smart, but a product of the environment you came out of. I feel the same way about SAT scores sometimes. But what it taught me, though, is that I wasn't getting through because I was the smartest. I was far from it. I was getting through because I wanted it more. And I just want to pause here for a moment and say one thing. The beauty of getting older is that you can look back on your life and see patterns that you couldn't see when you were living in the moment. Over the course of my life, I've noticed the same pattern with me. I'm never the smartest person in the room. I find myself over and over again in jobs where I feel like I'm not qualified, and I'm really having to stretch myself. But I've now learned how to recognize that emotion, and when it bubbles up in me, let me feel it for a second and then push past it, because I now realize that anyone who wants to grow, who wants to learn, and who wants to keep advancing is going to find themselves constantly in situations where they were at the beginning of a learning curve. It's not critical to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, people who think they are the smartest person in the room often don't listen very well. They lack curiosity because they think they already know the answer. And in my experience, it's really how quickly you adapt and learn in those environments and how you problem solve that makes you succeed. I remember having a job once, and I'd just gotten promoted into it, and I was having that crazy imposter syndrome that you get sometimes, and I remember kind of breaking down with a peer and being like, I can't do this job, and I don't know why they put me in it, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know any of these answers. And I remember her saying to me, your job is not to know the answer. Your job is to know how to figure out how to get the answer. And I was like, well, I can do that. And I feel like that's kind of been my whole life. But back to me growing up. I remember doing my final interview for the Morehead, and the last question I got asked was, if you could describe yourself in one word, what would that be? And without pausing a beat, I said, hungry. And everyone laughed. And one of the men in the room said, oh, we should let you go so you can get something to eat. And they all kind of got up and the interview was over. And I cried that night because I was like, oh my God, I've lost like this whole scholarship over a misunderstanding that they thought I was just physically hungry. And what I meant when I said hungry was that my fire ran so hot. It was a hunger to succeed and make something of myself in the world that fueled me. And there may be people out there that were smarter than me and more polished than me and knew the right way to eat at fancy banquets like this, but no one wanted it more than me. I still remember coming to the Morehead banquet, and I was like, Mom, I don't know how to eat with all these forks, and like, there's all this stuff, and like, she's like, just go from the outside in. That's all, your entire life, just go from the outside in. I'm like, I still think about it today. So now that you've made it to the finals of this scholarship, I think you know what I'm talking about. We are the type of people who stay hungry. We want to make a difference in the world. We want to be at the top of our field. We want to experience it all. We want to be the best. And what I want for all of you today is to be able to get the scholarships. You can put that hunger to work. So growing up poor meant that getting a full ride through the Morehead Scholarship was a big deal. There's absolutely no denying that. But what changed my life was the summer programs. And I remember, Stephen, you talking about this today and a few others too. It's like, this was the thing that catapulted. Because every summer, instead of going back to the farm and working a minimum wage job, I built my resume and I developed myself as a person and as a leader. I got to see cities that I had never seen in the US and traveled abroad for the first time in my life. I suddenly had really interesting things to talk about, because back in my day, we actually did like the police internships, which is crazy now, right? And everybody, like when I tell people that I did a police internship in Rochester, New York, and that I was with the K-9 unit and I saw an autopsy and everyone's like, who are you? Like I became very interesting, which was it was a real benefit. But perhaps more importantly, I actually had a portfolio of work to show in interviews after having done an interview in New York City at a well-known ad agency there, and from magazine internships I did on my summer abroad in Sydney, Australia. I used my summers to build my resume, but also to build myself. By the time I graduated UNC, I wasn't scared at all to move cross-country for my first job. The Morehead had given me the gift of no fear. And I want to tell you a little truth about getting your first job. At 22 years of age, you don't have a lot to offer an employer other than your passion, your ability to work well in a team, and your ability to learn fast. Every 22-year-old on paper looks the same. If you want to work at a top place in your field, every candidate will have gone to a good school, and they will have gotten good grades. And when I went to interview for my first job out west, no one even cared that I was a Morehead Scholar because they had no idea what that was. Like, West Coast employers are much more familiar with Stanford and USC and UCLA. So what the Morehead summer programs gave me was a way to stand out in a sea of resumes. You could not deny that I was passionate about marketing because I'd used my Morehead summers to build out my experience and show that passion. I didn't just have volunteer and club experience, I had real experience. I had internships that would have been impossible to get otherwise. I had ways to show I was a leader and that I was driven. And for a kid with very few connections out in the world who did not come from a rich family, this was a huge unlock. The summer programming was how I got in the door, and once I was in, no one was going to stop me. So as a Morehead alumni now, I have a big passion for helping out Moreheads who want to be in marketing. What you will tap into with this scholarship is a family of people who get you and want to help you. If I see an email that says Morehead Scholar wanting to connect, I'm absolutely going to respond to that. I've done informational interviews, I've connected scholars with people I know, I've gotten scholars interviews for jobs. I love to mentor students, and I'm proud to say that a couple of those have gotten jobs in the field. And I don't say this because I want you to know this about me in particular. I'm actually not special in that way. If you're part of this scholarship program, every Morehead Scholar will do the same for you, because we know what it's like to be hungry, and we know what a gift it was to get a scholarship like this, and how it changed our lives in ways that we could never have imagined. And we all know that leaders like you, like me, we all need a hand up. So when it comes to my career, I am a mixture of proud, grateful, and humble. I'm really proud to have worked on brands that I love, doing work that I love. I remember working on Nike Plus Running back in the day and thinking, oh my God, my job is to get people fit. Like, that's really cool. Like, I just kind of was like, this is like it felt like a value that I could kind of live. And I got to work on Nike Women's, and I remember getting to interview Serena Williams in her home in Florida, and about leadership and how to rise above. And I just remember in my head this like, thank you, 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 thank you. I can't believe I get to do this. And when I was at Tinder, I had to say I'm so grateful to have gotten to be part of building something that has become a rite of passage for every young person in the world. I'm also in PR, if you can't tell. And there's so many things that I got to learn in this job as a global job. I got to learn about cultural differences in dating in places like the US, obviously, but also in India, in Japan, in Muslim countries like Indonesia. And now I'm leading marketing at Kate Spade, which is a brand I've loved all my life. But the work I'm most proud of at Kate Spade is not our Fashion Week programming or our events or our marketing campaigns. Kate Spade also has a long history of providing resources to promote the mental health and empowerment of women and girls around the world. I am humbled every day about how much need for mental health support there is out in the world, especially post-COVID, and to know I can't move fast enough or do enough to ever fill that need completely. But that doesn't stop me from trying. I love that my job has given me this opportunity to give back in this way at a scale that could really only be done at a corporation like Kate Spade. So my path started by having a chip on my shoulder and wanting to prove myself. I remember being right where you are today, having this lovely meal, surrounded by other accomplished individuals, hoping to be chosen. You're gonna have a lot of life moments like this one today because you're the type of leader who creates opportunities for yourself, and more importantly, for others. Being the type of leader who can create opportunity just by sheer determination, heart, and hustle is a gift to everyone around you. You are a gift to your community. I've seen it, talking to all of you today, I know this to be true, and they are so lucky to have you. No matter what happens in the interviews today, I have no doubt you will continue to create opportunities, and I can't wait to see what you do. And while I hope you are no longer physically hungry, we will never get that wrong again, after this lovely meal, I hope that you always stay mentally and emotionally hungry. So, thank you.